Hello and welcome back, guys. We're now starting a new story, Izuku Must Date Monster Girls to Survive UA, written by Kuji. You can find author's profile link in the description. Let's begin Chapter 1. UA Campus. Izuku Midoriya POV. Having just moved, everyone was quite nervous, so when Ishido decided to show off their rooms and vote, I was quite embarrassed to show off my room. Unsurprisingly, the girls all voted for Sato because of the mini oven he had installed into his room. With the boys' votes everywhere despite our better number, the girls basically ended up deciding the winner. Not that I cared that much, as no one made fun of my room full of All Might merchandise. Bakugo was still tense for some reason, and when he asked me to go with him somewhere in the middle of the night, I was a bit worried. But when I noticed Tokoyami, Ishido, and based off of the sudden indent of a foot in the grass where there was no one standing, I assumed Toru as well. Despite Bakugo yelling at me to pay attention to what he was saying, I told him we would talk about it tomorrow if he wanted, and gave chase. Even if the school has increased its security, it was still too dangerous for a group of girls to be wandering around campus at night with people like Mineta staying on campus. Bakugo did not seem to follow if the silence I experienced was anything to go by, so I was able to keep track of the three to find them entering the woods. Curious as to why they were going to the small wooded area of UA this late, I followed them into the woods to make sure they were not doing anything dangerous. When I caught up to them, however, as I had momentarily lost them due to almost running into a tree while going into deep thought, I saw everything. I do not know if it was me or one of them who screamed first, but all I saw before passing out was the three of them and some of the girls from 1B along with Midnight Sensei standing naked in a lake chanting some wired language. UA Forest third-person POV. Just barely making it in time to the small lake due to having to rush after making sure everyone was in their rooms, Mina, being seen as the leader of the trio, had to apologize to Shiozaki. "What kept you so long?" Shiozaki said, raising an eyebrow at the pink-skinned girl before her who was gasping for air. "Sorry about that, the sleeping medicine took longer to affect the humans than we thought. I guess it did not mix well with the celebratory orange soda." Mina responded back, remembering how annoying it was to convince them she had no ulterior motive for putting it in a punch bowl. "No matter, let's get comfortable and begin the ritual, shall we?" Midnight said to them. A pair of small midnight blue wings growing from her back, a midnight blue tail with a heart-shaped tip at the end, and a pair of small curly horns growing from the top of her head. Being a succubus, she decided to take up the role of the 18-plus hero so she would not need to hide her true nature in public growing up. Following Midnight's lead, the other began as well. Mina did not have to change her appearance at all except for her height going up to 6 feet, as that was sadly all she could do to transform herself. But at least it was better than nothing. Tokoyami was still embarrassed by getting undressed in front of them, even though they were all girls, did so with raven black wings growing from her back and her beak growing another 6 inches. As a Tengu, she would leave much to people's expectations, but sadly for humans they were not as all-knowing as they thought they were. The fact she had to rely on the shadow magic she used to fake her quirk in a fight rather than her kind innate sword skills that she lacked did not help her much in representing her kind properly. Toru turned off her invisibility, with almost appealing butterfly-like wings sprouting from her back as she began to glow. Though she did get lonely easily, she still did not feel safe showing her face to humans, so she used her fairy magic to make herself invisible when around humans. Shiozaki, who was now undressed, began having her skin turn a dark green, and roses blossoming over her arms and legs. As a dryad, or more specifically a rose dryad, she did not like people destroying the environment or having private gardens trapping other roses from the outside world. Not to be the only dryad there, Kanoko Komori began having her skin turn a dark brown like rich soil with mushrooms popping up all over her body. Finally, was Reiko Yanagi, whose hair suddenly turned from silver to black and small wisps of flames appeared behind her following her as she began walking into the water. Being the daughter of a Yurei, or more specifically a floating spirit, and a Ipondatra, she did not inherit her mother's talent for blacksmithing or her powers in general, but did inherit some of her appearance. When it came to her father, she inherited his posture and her poltergeist-like powers from him, as well as most of her appearance. Agreeing once they moved, this was after discussing it with Nizu of course, they would all gather at this lake once a month to boost their powers through a full moon ritual. This was so that they could easily use more of their powers without breaking the disguises they constantly use to live among humans. The ritual was going well when they heard a scream and saw one Izuku Midoriya scream, as they fainted where they stood just beyond the bushes. "Well ladies, looks like we are and not in the good way," Midnight said as they for once did not waste time disagreeing with her about how important SEC was. Chapter 2 UA Forest third-person POV. Finally coming back to consciousness after he passed out, he saw everyone now covered in vines as their clothes were soaked and hanging on a tree branch behind them. Well, everyone was covered in vines except for Shiozaki, who was covered in thorny roses, and Kinoko, who was covered in mushrooms. Somehow these were more RTC than the dresses, chest wraps and shorts made of vines the others were wearing. As a result, he was unable to look at any of them directly thanks to this, as well as how he saw them all naked just moments ago. Needless to say, they all gave chase except for the two dryads who knew they could catch up to him easily. "So how long till they remember that we can immediately catch up to him in the woods?" Shiozaki asked her mushroom friend from their childhood. "I don't think they will remember, but we may as well let them try and watch the show. Though I am jealous how he took all the attention in an instant like he did," Kinoko said, doubting they could catch up to a desperate human as fast and nimble as him. Surprisingly, her jealousy of attention was an odd trait for a dryad, as normally they hate interacting with most of the human race. The reason the trait was odd is that while her childhood friend Shiozaki was half human, she herself was a purebred dryad, so it was seen as odd since she had no direct connection to humans like Shiozaki. Though that direct connection also had its own troubles to go along with that connection. Mina, who was too big to run through the forest without causing noticeable damage, had to shrink herself down to her disguise form. This, however, meant her vines fell off, causing her to chase after him naked like some sort of streaker. Sadly, her acid magic she uses on a daily basis as her so-called quirk, to be treated somewhat properly in her daily, was also out of the question here. Izuku also had an advantage over her as he could maneuver from the treetops unlike her. Tokoyami, who passed off her shadow familiar made from her magic as her quirk, could not control them at night as of yet. This meant that they also could not catch up to Izuku in the treetops, now you thinking flying would allow her to catch up to him. But sadly her wings were too big to easily fly in between the tight-knit trees of this mini forest on UA campus. This advantage of his, however, did not help him with the others who could fly through this tight space like Hagakure, Yanagi and Midnight. "Get back here, darling, and I may give you the pleasant kind of punishment," Midnight yelled, cracking her WHP, just barely missing him each time she tried to strike him out of the air. Smiling like a madwoman, she could not help but think it would be a waste for him to just simply be executed for finding out the truth. However, in this moment of lustful and hungry fantasizing, she did not see him stop to bend a branch before it hit her on the butt as she passed him, causing her to spiral out of control and crash land. "No thank you, sensei." Izuku, despite being terrified and confused, still managed to treat her politely out of reflex. However, he still had a high-speed fairy with pale green with pink stripes in it and two determined-looking teal eyes, as well as a girl with black hair, blue eyes, or rather one blue eye, chasing him. Hagakure would send orbs of light his way, making him visible in the middle of the night for the attacks of Yanagi, which were quite devastating. Yanagi eye laser she was firing it was fortunately in a straight condensed line, granted based off the heat they gave off he guessed they could easily melt metal or soften metal. Despite their power though, they were easy enough to dodge, well on their own anyways. There were a few times where he almost collided with a tree due to her making an illusion of one in front of a real tree. He assumed this was Hagakure doing based off the very little folklore of fairies he had read in the past about them tricking humans and making illusions. As a result, he had to not only pay attention to the attacks from behind, the trees in front of him, but also the shadows her light orbs that cast on the ground to tell which trees were fake or real. This culmination of attacks forced him to turn around and fight them head-on before he could escape. However, there was an upside to this. When he looked back, however, he saw Yanagi wincing, waiting 5 seconds before firing it again. However, each use of this eye laser made her eye redder, so it was clear that it was like Aizawa-sensei quirk where he had limited time and uses of it in a row before it needs to stop. Pivoting off a large tree trunk he swung around it, catapulting himself toward them, gritting hit teeth as one of the lasers grazed his left ribs. The shocked look on their faces was definitely what he was expecting, so it was a good sign his plan was working. What the hell is he thinking? Hagakure thought, unable to wrap her head around what he was thinking at this moment. Does he really think it is better to descend into the abyss as a brave fool? Yanagi asked herself, unable to think of why else he would try such a suicidal tactic as rushing towards them. However, it was far from suicidal, as when Hagakure sent another light orb his way to keep him illuminated for Yanagi, their tag attack fell apart. The light was too close to Yanagi, as a result she missed her next shot by a large margin due to being unable to look straight at him. This meant he was able to get in close and land his feet on his stomachs, kicking her into a tree very hard before retreating back to the outside of the forest. To deal with Hagakure, he launched an air bullet at her as he jumped away, getting a direct hit on her chest. This knocked the air out of her lungs, causing her to hold onto a tree branch as she was unable to properly fly until she got air back into her lungs. He was just at the edge, able to see beyond the forest, when he was grabbed by Kinoko and Shiozaki with the mushroom girl from above while the rose girl held him by his waist. Kinoko then released mushroom spores from the back of her hand just under his nose. These spores were of a specific variety to put animals to sleep. With them being rooted to the tree, they held him down long enough for the spores to affect him. Back at the lake he woke up wrapped up in vines, as everyone except Hagakure were dressed in their clothes, with her being wrapped in a dress of vines. So, what do we do with him? I know for a fact that my family will demand he be killed, or his memory erased at bare minimum. Tokoyami said, dejectedly shaking her head. As a succubus I am an expert on erasing memories, so I can tell you that it is a bad idea to erase them. As to make sure he did not remember, I would have to erase memories of all of us. Midnight said, sighing as she shook her head in a manner to indicate no. So, what is so dangerous about that? Hagakure asked, not seeing how erasing his memories of his time since the start of UA would be dangerous. Due to my hero career, his memories would likely be erased up till the age of 4. Erasing memories going back that far will most likely destroy his mind and reduce him to a literal infant in terms of mental capabilities. Midnight said with a small smile as she rested her head on the palm of right hand while her left held up her right elbow. So basically, we may as well be killing him. Well then, I do not care which one he chooses. Shiozaki says, though upset he saw her naked, not wanting to make his mother or father suffer more than necessary. This was when they noticed had finally woken up and jumped into a Dajiza position despite his arms and legs being tied up. I promise I won't tell anybody about what I saw tonight. Izuku declared, hoping to avoid the horrible fate they were casually discussing. Chapter 3 UA Nizu Office Third-Person POV. It was 3 in the morning and Izuku was now sitting on his knees as the girls told Principal Nizu what had happened. I did not mean to peep on them, I swear. I was just worried about their safety. Izuku clarified to his principal, trying to make it not seem as bad as everyone was putting it. To his surprise though, Principal Nizu was laughing at this, confusing Izuku and the others. My apologies, young Midoriya, but do not worry about me thinking you are a pervert. As an elder god who is the second cousin of Cthulhu, I have seen my fair share of human trials to know when someone is lying about their innocence. Nizu said as he took a sip of his tea. However, the leading of his throat and adjustment of his necktie did not inspire confidence in Izuku of if he would survive or not. That being said, we are in a sticky situation. As the Dryad's leaders will demand your death as well as the Tengu. There is a way for you to survive. All you have to do is marry all of them and you will be allowed to know the secret of their existence. Nizu said in glee at their shocked faces. What the hell? Everyone except Nizu responded with to his statement. Oh come now, Midnight, not only are you unpopular due to your decision to dedicate your life to saving humans, but everyone else here is highly unlikely to find a marriage partner for other reasons, which is why you followed Midnight Lead to be a hero. Your parents told me all about your problems before you applied and got accepted into my hero academy. Besides, I already asked them all before you came up here and they agreed. Nizu said, seeing the sore shocked looks on all their faces as no one amongst them wanted to Acknowledge that nasty truth as well as the fact their parents decided this behind their backs. The pitiful look from Midoriya embarrassed them enough to look away from him. Though midnight is optional, the succubus are the most relaxed about humans finding out if they exist so long as they are married or a mate of another non-human species. So if she wants to, she needs to be careful about PDA in public, as humans now consider 18 to be adulthood rather than 15 like they once did. He said, making it clear that the spinster needed to keep that in mind. Granted, he himself approved, as Midoriya was 15 and therefore a young adult in his eyes. Looking at him, no one had any particular reason to hate the idea, as Midoriya was one of the cutest boys in either of the two classes. Besides looks, he was very gentle and selfless, so they doubt he will push them to do anything perverted or out of their comfort zones. If anything, they were more likely to have to be the ones to make the first move in the relationship. Well, I guess this is alright, though it is not like I couldn't do better. Mina said with a light dusting of purple on her cheeks as she looked at Izuku with a sideways glance. This caught Izuku's eye, as he mentally had to restrain himself from thinking this girl, who might have considered his enslavement or killing him earlier apparently, was looking cute to him. It is not every day a fairy gets to have her own human toy to play with. Hagakure said, turning around, well, at least based on how her boots turned in her invisible form by everyone's guess who was looking at her. Though the fact she was referring to him as a toy made Izuku nervous of what she was thinking of doing to him later away from public view. It will be nice at least to have a hand to hold in the dark abyss of this dreary life. Tokoyami said as she played with her fingers while staring at her feet. Her feathers made it hard to tell if she was blushing, but between the low tone of her voice and how she looked down as she played with her fingers made it clear she was also not confident in this situation. This may not have been the greatest of blessings right now, but at least it meant she was a lot less likely to hurt him like the other two so far. Well, at least I can easily introduce them to my father at his church. Shiozaki said in her usual neutral tone, which was at least reassuring for Izuku as she was no longer glaring at him. Granted, the small upward curve of her lips' edges combined with her blush made him worried in a slightly different yet not as panic-inducing way as before. Though it did make Izuku wonder what her father's church was made of, given his wife was apparently a dryad. Even if it is to the same guy, at least I will technically be in a relationship with Ibra. Kinoko said, raising alarms in not just Izuku's but everyone else's heads that she may swing for the other team. Or she just had a crush on Ibra. Either way, it would be much preferred by Izuku if he could get away with one less lover to handle. Well, his eyes are cute enough for me to enjoy looking into. Yanagi said with a blush almost hidden under her face mask, closing her eye in what seemed to be embarrassment to look at him. Though after seeing her laser eye he was definitely not ready to jump at the idea of staring lovingly into her eye at a romantic dinner like he saw on TV. Well, I did always think a younger man's spout would make for a tastier white drink. Midnight said, giving Izuku the urge to cover his PP while the others were giving her a look that read as, really? At her reasoning. You all know full well we succubus need to feed off of the energy of others to survive. Any other succubus would say the same thing. She yelled at them all, making the other girls raise both of their hands in surrender at this outburst, while Principal Natsu was calmly making himself another cup of tea. Well, in any case, an engagement for the next 2 or 3 years will be enough. After that long the others should trust him enough to let him live. So no need to worry about sealing the deal on this marriage issue. You can just officially break it off after graduation, so no pressure. Principal Nizu said, making everyone almost faceplate in shock at this due to getting their hopes up by him on the subject. Why didn't you say that sooner? They all yelled at Nizu with deep blushes of embarrassment, including Izuku. At this point the green-haired student was wondering if he could survive till graduation. Well, at least I can die while having a girlfriend, so it won't be too bad, right? Izuku thought as he was finally released to go to bed. To go to bed in Mina room with Tokoyami and Hagakure, with the latter insisting he wear a BLNDFLD so she could sleep without her invisibility on. Chapter 4 UA Class 1A Dorms Mina room. Third person POV. Izuku woke up after a hard time falling asleep to find himself in a position. He had no idea how it happened, given he fell asleep on the floor while the other 3 slept on the bed. Though given he had a dream about getting choked, kicked, and bitten by villains that had invaded UA. It made sense to him. Mina at her 6-foot height had her arms wrapped around his neck, pushing half his face into her melons with the large blanket on top of them all. Toru, who had turned upside down, had her foot shoved into the other side of his face while snuggling the part of the blanket to her face with her face close to his knees. Tokoyami meanwhile had her beak buried in his shoulder, which due to the angle felt like he was being bitten by someone. Fortunately for him, Toru had not woken up yet to see the blndfld she made him wear was now removed, and he coils down through the blanket at her naked body. Unsure at first at who to wake up between Tokoyami and Mina to ask them to help him with the blndfld scenario, he heard Toru making groans. No, 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 no. I need to just pick one. Izuku mentally screamed in a panic as he nudged Tokoyami with his hand that was pressed against her. Unfortunately for him, due to his hand he had discovered in the process she was wearing, well, it was tiny, to put it in a less specific and panic-inducing way. Responding to the feeling of Izuku knuckles essentially rubbing directly into her folds as his fingers slipped past her thin underwear. A slow building heat in her stomach due to the rubbing of his knuck started causing her to coo in her rather than wake up. Rubbing her head under his chin, now he began feeling a tickling sensation due to her feathers. Between his need to suppress his laughter and getting his little Deku to go back down, his attention was too divided to notice Mina waking up. When he turned his eyes to her finally, he noticed how she was almost all purple with her mouth opening and closing repeatedly without noise. Mina at first was very quiet due to shock of what she was seeing herself doing before she noticed Izuku was not only unblindfolded but up, to put it in a friendly way. Then she heard cooing and saw Tokoyami and put two things together to realize he was doing something to her bird-headed friend. Mina was about to scream as she pulled away from Izuku, but he shut her up with a kiss by lunging forward, unintentionally doing tongue as a result. This caused a domino effect of results that nearly got them caught still. Tokoyami had ended up pecking and rubbing her beak against Hagikure's foot, waking her up in shock at what she was doing to the fairy's foot. As for Tokoyami, due to fairies always giving off a flowery smell unless suppressed, Tokoyami did not notice till she kicked the bird-headed girl in the side of her head, waking her. Before Hagikure could yell at Izuku for not wearing the blndfld and kissing Mina, there was a frantic knock on the door to the room. "Are you okay, Hagikure?" Momo exclaimed, trying to force the door open when she did respond right away. Letting out a nearly silent tsk sound, she cleared her throat to level her voice before responding. Fine, Momo. It was just a bad dream, that's all," Hagikure said, getting a sigh from the ponytailed girl and a promise to make her an herbal tea for her breakfast to help her. Pulled Izuku and Mina apart after turning herself invisible, she helped up an embarrassed Tokoyami. Tokoyami grabbed one of Mina's towels from a drawer next to her before Izuku looked at her to see she was not dry as she would prefer to be seen. How did we get into this position?" Tokoyami asked, unsure of what happened but had a good guess. "Well, you see." Mina began explaining to them why Izuku was kissing her and how she had a habit of falling out of her bed in her sleep. This answered to them how they joined Izuku on the floor, so Hagikure was less mad at him for what he did as well as his body reaction to them. However, that did not mean she was not mad at him at all, just a lot less compared to when she woke up. "By the way, how do I get back to my room without getting spotted?" Izuku asked, as not a single one of them had thought about that last night. However, none of the girls trusted him sleeping by himself in case he tried to run away at night to leave them high and dry on this mess. As such, they all agreed that before going to the dorms last night, that the two classes of girls would take turns having him sleep with them during the week. 3 days one week and 4 days the other week, at least until they trusted him to not try to run away from them. Principal Nizu had told them that he would come up with a plan to deal with this that he would reveal later on before they swap turns in a few days. "Well, I guess we just have to sneak you out of here for now after all the girls go down and hope for the best," Hagikure said, sighing as they had him turn around while they got dressed enough to go out into the halls of the girls' side. UA Nizu office third-person POV. Aizawa was currently standing in front of clearly sleepy Nizu if his yawning was anything to go by, along with him was a restrained Bakugo. Last night the security system notified him that Bakugo was destroying ground beta, and after Aizawa caught him doing so he was shocked when he called Nizu. That was the fact that Nizu, who was in his office when he called at 2 in the morning, had told him to come by with Bakugo at noon the next day. Now it was not unheard of for Nizu to be there all night every now and again, so he was not surprised by that. He was surprised when he was told they were too busy to immediately deal with what would normally be considered a major issue. As a result, he had to knock Bakugo out cold and restrain him in quirk-suppressant cuffs in his roommate the teacher's dorm till the meeting. When it came time to bring him to Nizu, they had to first discuss with Bakugo why he destroyed UA property in the middle of the night. That DMN Deku turned his back on my challenge. That coward refused to fight me. Bakugo screamed at them as he struggled in the quirk-suppressant cuffs as tears formed on the edges of his eyes. The ramblings of the student continued till Aizawa wrapped his mouth shut with his scarf. This only raised more questions for Aizawa sadly, though not for Nizu, as he was told by Midoriya about Bakugo approaching last night, which was why he was out late. Looks like we need to call in Dash. Aizawa was about to say they should bring in Izuku when Nizu cut him off. No, we really don't. Nizu shut him down right away, which caused the 1A homeroom teacher to raise an eyebrow at this. Why do you think we should not ask him for his side of the story? Aizawa now had a bad feeling, like he did on his missions, that something was up with his boss and his student. He walked away from the confrontation before anything actually happened. So, I see no need to treat him like he was in trouble, rather we should temporarily suspend Bakugo from the hero course till we figure out why he broke down. Then we can send him to therapy with Hound Dog multiple times per week till it is deemed safe to allow them back in the course. Nizu told his third favorite employee, getting passed by Midnight and Power Loader while getting followed up by Hound Dog and Recovery Girl. The plan of the principal was simple but necessary, as this was officially the third time Bakugo proved himself a potential danger to the other students. First incident was during the first training exercise when he disobeyed All Might's direct order to stop his attack. The only reason he did not get punished at the time was due to All Might ending up taking blame afterwards for not calling off the fight if he did so. With how fragile Hero Society was due to All Might holding it all together on his own, the principal could not risk doing so at the time. Second instance would have been the mid-term exam, where he suspected Bakugo punched Midoriya in one of the camera-free zones due to All Might's attack destroying a lot of them. But due to the fact that they had no footage and Midoriya did not approach them about it, they could not do anything. At least not without getting Bakugo more upset at the green-haired teen than he already was. So, the official second incident was during the training camp when he disobeyed the order to not fight the villains when he was told to focus on retreating, especially after he was told he was the target. So, with this third incident, had no reason to give Bakugo any more chances to change his behavior on his own, so with that he dismissed the teacher. He then called the parents of the blonde to deliver the news to them, as well as arrange a meeting to discuss the mess. Chapter 5 UA Class 1A Dorm's Kitchen. Third-person POV. After getting dressed and putting on deodorant, Izuku made Ho's way down, before the other three, and decided to make it up to them by making breakfast for them. As he was walking into the kitchen, he spotted Momo making the tea she mentioned and was worried about how to explain why he was making breakfast for the three of them. Then he realized how he could get away with it, and though he was willing to do it, he still felt bad though using her. "Hey Momo, are you making tea for someone else?" Izuku asked her, embarrassed by how he was unable to stop his stuttering when he talked to her despite what he recently survived. "Oh, good morning Midoriya. Yes, you are correct. Hagakure had a bad nightmare last night and woke up screaming despite sleeping with Ashido and Tokoyami," Momo said in genuine concern for who she thought was her still badly traumatized classmates. Not noticing the wince from Izuku, as he knew he was the real reason for the screaming, she continued onward. "Do you want to help them as well?" she asked him, happy that he was still his helpful self despite the massive trauma he went through. Especially when compared to her and others in the two classes that got off lucky compared to him, as well as the few others who went through the worst of it. "Why yeah, I was thinking that I should make breakfast for them since they are already awake," Izuku said, making it seem like he just wanted to lend a hand to some other early risers. "Then please, allow me to help you," Momo said as she pressed the palms of her hands together with a delightful expression on her face. That face only lasted for about 15 minutes, as after those 15 minutes the kitchen was a mess, to put it lightly. Sorry Midoriya, I will focus on the cleaning. Momo said in despair at the mess she made for Izuku, who she just thought that he wanted to help his classmates after hearing their plight. The stove top was completely burnt beyond use, half the kitchen counter was destroyed to the point it could not be used either, and finally most of the pots and pans they had since they just moved in were destroyed also. So Izuku had to get a bit creative and start over, so he tested a few breakfast theories he never tried before at home due to his mother always making breakfast for him. To start off he made toast, as it needed to be the base of the breakfast. Once they were done, he would butter them so he could put the eggs on them. For the eggs themselves he took glass measuring glasses and filled it with salt, pepper, a little lemon juice, and water before adding the egg in there. Once those were in the microwave for 3 minutes, he began making bacon on the waffle iron. That's amazing Midoriya! Momo exclaimed as she finished cleaning up the food that she spilled on the floor when she tried cooking before. Oh no, this is nothing. Izuku said, waving her thrill off like it was nothing. Compared to what I did, this really is amazing. Oh, I better make the tea. Momo remembered what she was originally going to do and got to it. For himself Izuku made waffles using the now greased waffle iron, as he needed a more carb-heavy diet due to One for All. Naturally he balanced these kinds of breakfasts with an array of vitamins and mineral supplements to make up for the lack of variety. Thanks for the tea Yomomo wow. Mina said, stopping her sentence to freak out at the sight of Midoriya's plate of waffles. I think we are all good with what you made for us, hopefully the others come down before they go cold. Hagakure said, whose strange smile though unseen was definitely heard by the others, except for Izuku, that is. What are you talking about? This is my breakfast. Izuku responded, confusing them as he poured himself a glass of orange juice to go with his plate of waffles normally meant for 3 or 4 people. With half the bottle of maple syrup transferred from said bottle to the pile of waffles, Izuku and the other began eating. The eggs are perfectly poached. Hagakure said in excitement as she broke the egg and saw the toast covered in delicious yellow yolk, almost like a golden blanket. This bacon is just the right amount of crispy and chewy. Mina exclaimed as, just like most oni, she preferred meat to vegetables and fruit. Though Izuku still needed to make sure he never let her near any alcohol, as they had a bad habit as a whole species of drinking a whole 2-liter bottle after just a single sip. Your toast is still soft and fluffy on the inside while crunchy on the outside. Tokoyami, due to her beak, held a great appreciation for these perfect textures from foods, especially fruit or grains. Indeed Midoriya, it is a good thing you are a boy, or else I would say you would be our biggest rival amongst the girls for finding a boyfriend. Momo said, much calmer than the other 3, almost dejectedly, as she could not help but recall how bad she was just a little bit ago. She considered asking him for lessons in the kitchen to help impress her girlfriend Kyoka with a late birthday celebration. As her initial plans during the training trip fell through for obvious reasons that she would rather never discuss ever again. Well, with cooking this good he will be lucky if I don't jump him before the end of the day. Mina said happily as the others turned to her, making her realize she said that out loud. Then turning to Midoriya, she saw him red as a tomato, piece of waffle on his fork still, as his hand was only halfway to his mouth when she spoke. Okay, to be fair, in my family we don't really use skis. The fanciest thing we usually eat is kebabs with meats and veggies on them, so my palate was really limited before UA. She said, embarrassed, as Oni usually did not think wasting time on cooking was something the strong should do, so they stuck to the bare minimum. All of a sudden, they all felt a surge of bloodlust directed towards Mina. When they checked just around the corner of the doorway, they saw nothing and decided it was just their imaginations after the camp incident. Ochiko, after they went back to the kitchen, had immediately run upstairs, finally able to safely stop her floating before breathing again. Catching her breath after she held it for so long to avoid getting caught, her mind was now swirling with chaos as she was wondering why he even made them breakfast. Then there was Mina's comment to think about, which caused a flood of tears that she could not understand why were happening. What am I supposed to do? Ochiko just barely avoided yelling as she asked herself before getting tapped on her shoulder. Chapter 6 Third-person POV Tsuyu, who spotted a crying Ochiko, had brought her friend back to her room to ask why she was crying, but when she did, she wanted to smack her face. Not because her friend's feelings were absurd but because she was as dense as her crush, and it sounded like a straightforward girl finally made her move on the green-haired boy. "I will be quick, Uraraka, you are in love with Midoriya, and he has feelings for you as well," she told her friend as she blushed and began stammering in response to the statement. What? Ochiko exclaimed as she accidentally floated herself up in shock at this revelation from her extremely blunt friend. "Calm down, Uraraka, I doubt he realized his feelings for you either. But with someone as assertive as Mina going after him, she may end up turning those feelings away from you," Tsuyu told her, unsure of what reason he could have had for making the four girls breakfast like he did. But the comment of Mina, if heard right, was clear as day as to whether or not the pink-skinned girl could start to fall for the gravity wielder's crush. "If you want to have him acknowledge your feelings, you will need to tell him before she does. He is too dense to figure it out otherwise if you leave it up to him." And that was without Mina distracting him from it like she is right now. Tsu said as this brought Ochiko back to her senses, which was when the two began discussing how to do it. It was during this that one thought came to the frog girl's mind. "I wish I could have had a taste of that breakfast, it smelled really good," she thought as her friend ignored her rumbling stomach due to her romance problem. UA Gym Gamma third-person POV Izuku thought he could get a break from them after breakfast, but to his surprise they followed him to the gym to join him in quirk training. Thankfully for him, Momo and Ida, who came back from his morning jog, joined with the training starting among them while a commotion was occurring at the dorms. Ida was running along the edges of the large rectangular center with Mina, who was doing it beside him with her acid as they practiced taking tight turns. At first, they went full speed and wiped out, so Izuku gave them advice, slowly increasing their speed to get actual results. While that was going on, the others were doing something more akin to endurance training rather than speed. Izuku was focusing on tapping into his quirk to draw out more energy while controlling it. Momo was using her quirk to make complicated circuit boards as quickly as possible while doing it properly as well. Finally, Hagakure and Tokoyami were practicing their quirks together. The fairy was holding a light spell that was a flash of light that, despite it normally being easier to make a ball of light, she needed to try and learn how to use this for her fake quirk. While this was going on, the bird-headed Tengu was practicing their shadow magic by maintaining their shadow familiar despite the trouble of doing this in the face of this bright light. After a little while they took a break and he saw Mina texting Yanagi about where they were. Whether or not they would come he did not know, but given how Monoma was still picking fights with Class 1A after the summer camp, he doubted it. Then again, it also made him wonder how he was supposed to take turns sleeping with the other girls in the 1B dorm without revealing their secret to the others. "Midoriya!" Ida exclaimed out of nowhere while talking with Momo, scaring them all. "Why, yes." Izuku yelled back in response with worry in his voice. He did something to upset him now somehow after he already upset all those girls. "I just heard what you did for the girls here after hearing of their troubles. I am ashamed I did not notice how the others in class may still be suffering from the experience," Ida said, bowing to Izuku repeatedly in what he thought was a shameful act. Izuku felt conflicted on what to say, as he did not do it to help them with the trauma from the camp attack but rather to try and save his own butt for a personal reason. However, he could not simply tell the bespectacled teen and Momo his real reason for doing so. However, he doubts that the three girls he originally intended to make breakfast for were as easy to fool as them on this matter, and knew full well why he made them breakfast. The feeling of someone glaring at him and no one except Toru showing him a dirty look made it clear. Granted, he could not see her, but the fact that no one else he could see was glaring at him meant it had to be the invisible girl, right? Using a telepathy spell that only fairies could use, Toru started a three-way conversation with the other two. "Do either of you two feel someone glaring at us?" Toru asked them with a tinge of worry in her inner voice. "Yeah, I do, it feels like it is coming from above us, but I can't see anyone, can either of you?" Mina asked her after confirming that it was not just the fairies' paranoid imagination after Izuku found them out. No, I can't, Tokoyami, they must be outside the windows. Can you get dark shadow through the wall? Toru asked the bird-headed young maiden if she could take a subtle peek at whoever was staring at them from above. Sadly no, there is no crack for me to do so, and if Mina tries to make the crack, then it might get unwanted attention from the other two. Tokoyami responded to their friend's request, hating to break the news to them and needing to shut down any reckless ideas from them. In that case I suggest we make use of Yaoyorozu's misunderstanding of Mina's comment earlier. Toru responded to the sad news about not simply having Mina use her acid to melt a small hole, by accident, so she went with her plan B. What? Mina could not help but exclaim, as it was obvious what Toru was suggesting. I agree, we must leave it to you, our pink-skinned friend. Tokoyami quickly responded, unable to look directly at the pink-skinned Oni girl who was one of her few friends in UA as well as in general. How could you? Mina shot back at them in betrayal at how they were leaving this embarrassing job up to her. Toru and Tokoyami mentally screamed at her to commit one of the worst kind of crimes on the list to do for your reputation if one was not a student. Since both of them refused to embarrass themselves when Mina already had done so, the Oni mentally sighed before blowing them a frustration-fueled raspberry. Chapter 7 UA Gym Gamma Third-Person POV. Mina mentally took a deep breath and stood up, swaying her hips as she sauntered over to Izuku, making sure she accidentally kicked Toru's ankle. Despite Tokoyami being the only one noticing other than the girl who got kicked by Mina during her. Hey Midoriya, could you be a good boy and stand up for me? Mina said, fluttering her eyelashes as she put her arms under her chest to push it up to make it more prominent. This earned a slightly blushing yet smiling gasp from Momo, a stuttering jaw drop from Ida, and a completely red-faced eep from the target of her words. Standing up in a flash with his quirk sparking around as he tried to respond to her but was unable to get any words out, just stood there. This made Mina happy as it meant she could get this over with quickly, though she could not help the dusting of purple on her cheeks. Do you know how hard it is to resist the adorable, well-toned piece of but that you are? Mina said as she did a slight bent down. Pushing herself against his chest, wrapping one arm around his waist, with her eyes looking up but on eye level with his chin. The way he stiffened up but was still slightly shaky meant she needed to make probably only one last push. So, what are you going to do to take responsibility for yourself, you green-haired cutie? She asked as she fully rested her weight onto him, pushing him to almost fall back before she lowered her arm to grab one of his butt cheeks, giving it a quick 2 firm squeezes. The butt grabbing was indeed the last push he indeed needed to freak out as slipped forward, accidentally kicking the part of the wall under the bench. Though he was still able to spin mid-air and land on his back while holding Mina so he would not hurt her. Are you two okay? Momo asked, now out of her romantic shock and into her now general shock at Izuku slipping while using his quirk. Midoriya. Ashido. Ida exclaimed alongside Momo at the same time as he stood up as well, momentarily forgetting the lecture he was about to give them. I'm fine, Ida and Yaoyorozu, what about you, Mina? Can you get dash? Izuku stopped just before he could finish as he realized the position the two were in. Right now, Mina was laying on top of him with his left arm going up the middle of her back to behind her head and his right hand on her butt. This resulted in him unintentionally pressing her head into his chest, squishing her melons against his abs. Her legs were folded as she straddled his waist with his hand clearly sinking into her behind, making it look like he was trying to push her PP against his. Before him or anyone could say anything, there was a squeak before a scream that, if not muffled by his shirt, would have hurt his ear till even tomorrow morning. I just wanted to tease you a little. I didn't mean to trip you. Mina exclaimed in a panic as she scrambled off of him, sitting on her but with her arms supporting her from behind. Sorry, I didn't meant to touch you that way without your permission. Izuku exclaimed back to her, bowing his head repeatedly while still on his butt as well. Ida began lecturing Mina about how inappropriate her behavior was for a student and just for anyone to do in public. Yaoyorozu meanwhile was trying to explain to Izuku about how despite a girl getting flirty like Mina was, he still had to be gentle with them. While these four were distracted and the sense of frustration from the glaring turned to bloodlust, Toru and Tokoyami got to work. However, as soon as Tokoyami tried to get dark shadow through, it hit a squishy wall. As a result, Tokoyami could not stop herself from making a face which Toru noticed. "Hey, what's the matter?" Toru whispered to Tokoyami, wondering why their face looked strained. "Something squishy is blocking the hole. To put enough force to go past it, I need to make dark shadow visible enough for them all to see." Tokoyami responded in her own whisper, annoyed that whoever was watching them noticed immediately what their plan was when they damaged the wall. Then suddenly Momo got a text message that made her face scrunch up, getting the attention of everyone. Enough so that everyone noticed, causing Ida to stop his lecture and everyone to ignore the thud that came from outside along with the corresponding ow. "We need to get back to the dorms, something happened involving Bakugo," Momo said as she pulled on Izuku's arms, getting him to follow her despite his shocked state. Tokoyami made sure to grab his stuff for him as they only brought a towel and not their phone, while Toru was just a little behind them as they had stopped to check the side of the gym quickly. UA Gym Gamma, outside, third-person POV. Ochiko, who was so absorbed by the sight of Izuku spending time with the other girls, was only made worse by the sight of Momo exposing herself beside him. Though she knew it was for her classmate's quirk, it still made her upset that Izuku was seeing Momo in her sports bra with her gym shirt tied around her waist. It at least helped her that her friend Sue was sticking to the wall under her while she floated and held onto the edge of the window looking down into the gym. However, when break time came for them, her rage began to overflow as she saw Mina and Tokoyami looking at Izuku while he chatted with Momo. She was fortunate they could not see her by the window when sitting on the bench, though she made sure to keep just her eyes above the edge while ducking occasionally as they were training earlier. "Ochiko, I think you should stop before he catches you stalking him like this before you confess." "Karo." Suyu told her friend, concerned with how extreme her behavior was starting to become just because of what Mina said earlier. "I know Tsu, it's just the dash," Ochiko said, suddenly stopping before a torrent of bloodlust began to surge forth, causing Tsuyu to shake in fear despite Ochiko not noticing. The cause of this sudden, steady, and strong flow of bloodlust was Mina, or rather her actions towards Izuku. After shoving her foot into her friend's mouth to silence her, the frog girl quickly shot her tongue down in front of the hole Izuku made in the wall below. Though not a tactical expert like Midoriya or Yaoyorozu, she was still smart enough to know that Tokoyami could squeeze her quirk through the opening to spot them. Ignoring the uncomfortable feeling of having her tongue probed by the living shadow, she maintained her composure till they came rushing out. When Hagakure quickly turned the corner to look at them, she just managed to pull her tongue back and turn invisible. Since she was wearing her hero costume, she was fine. Luckily, Ochiko floated herself to the top of the roof, so despite the momentary pause from their invisible classmate, they left quickly. That was too close for comfort. "Karo," Suyu said, letting out a sigh along with her grip on her invisibility. "We need to go get back to the dorms first," Ochiko exclaimed as she pulled Suyu along with her, running, not wanting to get caught by them. Since they left out of her window, no one would know any better if they got back to her room before Momo or the others saw them not there. UA Class 1A dorms. Before Momo got the message, third-person POV. Kaminari and Shiro were playing some rounds of Smash in the living room with Ojiro scolding them for not training, while Kirishima was trying to defend them. They had invited Mineta, but he said it was not the kind of smashing he would prefer, and they did not ask any further about the details of his plans. "Why are you two wasting time playing video games when you could be training instead?" Ojiro said with a pinched glare before shaking his head as they ignored him. "To be fair, it is pretty manly to do your own things when you want to," Kirishima told him as he put a hand on Ojiro's shoulder to get his attention focused on him. This was when Kaminari turned around while Shiro changed the item setting and the stage for the next fight as it was his turn. "Calm down, dude, at this rate if you don't relax a little you're going to blow up worse than Bakugo," Kaminari said, smiling as Shiro snickered at this as well as Ojiro's reaction. But before he could physically react, to which Kirishima would have intercepted, the door was swung open by their teacher dragging Bakugo and a small trolley cart. "Go to your room and grab what you need, you have 30 minutes to do so before I come up to get you," Aizawa said, glaring at Bakugo, who at least had the decency to flinch under his gaze. Kirishima was about to ask Bakugo something when Aizawa pulled him back till Bakugo got into the elevator and was out of sight. "Why is he grabbing some of his stuff?" Kirishima asked in a panic, grabbing his teacher by the shoulders, shaking him slightly. Aizawa, understanding his student was simply shocked by this, let it go and removed his hands before putting up his own to tell him to stop. "Due to him sneaking out last night to destroy one of the fake cities we use for training, he will be temporarily removed from the hero course. Then if, and it is a big if he manages to succeed in his therapy he will be transferred back to the hero course." Aizawa said, not liking that one of his more talented students blew their chances and Midoriya was getting special treatment from Nizu and All Might. "He what?" This time they all screamed in confusion, unsure of what they just heard was right, as well as the fact that Kaminari practically called it out moments before. "I will not repeat myself as I know you all heard me clearly. I will address the whole class about this announcement tomorrow in the homeroom class as classes will begin again tomorrow," Aizawa said, as today was Sunday and classes would start Monday tomorrow. Kirishima, after getting stopped by Aizawa to talk to Bakugo, began messaging everyone in the group chat as half the class had left the dorm earlier. 20 minutes after he started doing this, Ojiro bowed and apologized to Kaminari and Siro with a sort of shell-shocked tone to his voice. "My apologies for saying you two were not training hard enough. Make sure that you relax if you ever feel at your limit so you don't snap," Ojiro said in a clear state of shock at this news, not wanting them to follow in their friend's footsteps. It was during that moment when his head was down and being the only one facing the window, that Uraraka and Tsuyu ran past the window to the girls' side of the dorm. Momo and the group came a few minutes later through the front door shouting in confusion. UA Class 1A dorm's third-person POV. Without any warning, Momo was the first to enter, slamming the door, phone still in her hand as she clutched it tightly with the message still on screen. "Aizawa-sensei!" Momo exclaimed, walking up to an exasperated-looking Aizawa. "How could you and the teachers suddenly decide to remove him from the class without making a proper announcement first, or even worse, not telling his parents?" She asked him now to be much calmer and composed when compared to then she entered. Though not outwardly happy, she was glad that Bakugo would not disrupt lessons with his shouting or rude behavior anymore. "I agree that a proper protocol should be followed, even for a delinquent like Bakugo," Ida said, chopping his hands, secretly a little happy like Momo was about the explosive blonde leaving. Though the two representatives, and quite frankly most of the class, could not care either way if he was to be removed from the class due to his behavior. However, she was concerned about how sudden it was, or if his parents were properly informed, as they could do the same to all of them in the future if she does not stop it now. The remainder of the class came down as well, with Ochiko and Tsuyu wearing noise-blocking headphones around their necks. "I don't know what you were told by Kirishima, but Bakugo was already on thin ice after the incident at the training camp. After his incident of property damage from last night, the school has no choice but to remove him from the hero course and into general studies. His parents are most likely being informed right now as we speak if they made it over here as soon as Nizu called them," Aizawa told her calmly, rubbing his temples as their complaining was not helping his headache from staying up all night looking into Midoriya records. Though the underground hero admittedly only found odd entries in his school records that do not sound like Midoriya would do them. Bakugo he could see doing that stuff, but Midoriya picking fights with him while hiding his quirk. Yeah, the quirkless part of his record surprised him, but the boy clearly had a quirk which made him even more suspicious. Right now, that student Aizawa was suspicious of, was staring at him looking worried as he talked about Bakugo, growing more so as he talked. This confused him as based on the records he saw for the two students, it was most likely Bakugo was a bully, something else he now had to bring to Nizu. While Kirishima was filling them as well as the whole class of what was said so far, he heard the familiar ding of the elevator. "Good, you're done, now let's get you to the general education dorms. We will have another talk soon about the training camp behavior you displayed, as well as any behavior from your previous schools," Aizawa said, seeing the angry face turn from a scoff at the first half to look of utter shock for the second half, but not before getting punched by Uraraka. Where the hell do you get off scoffing at how you put us all in danger back there because of your stupid pride? Ochiko screamed before getting grabbed and held back by Shoji, who let out a small sigh remembering that night well. I understand how you feel, Uraraka, but he is getting punished for it, so calm down before Aizawa-sensei has to punish you for fighting him about it. Shoji said, barely holding himself back from slapping the SHT out of Bakugo for trying to brush off what he did. Aizawa, as much as he wanted to rein in her behavior and assert his authority by punishing her, knew it would cause him more trouble from the others. Looking around, they all seemed to almost collectively agree about wanting to hit Bakugo for what he did. Grab your stuff and hurry up, you took 2 minutes longer than I gave you. He said, hoping his loud-mouthed friend was there to take over while he went to hopefully join Nizu talk about Bakugo fate. Once everyone calmed down, they finally took notice of something very important. Why is Ishido holding on to Midoriya's arm? Jiro asked, taking note of it, and turning everyone's attention to them. I was feeling cold. Mina squeaked out as she slowly let go of Izuku, her purple cheeks on bright display for them all to see as she chuckled awkwardly. I thought it was because you were dating him, but knowing your behavior it is possible I'm wrong. Todoroki said, despite his second half of his comment now cementing the idea in all of them. It is rude to pry into someone's love life, Todoroki. But I am curious as well and ready to offer my help if she asks for it. Momo said, revealing her slight hypocrisy when it came to romance or other subjects she has a personal interest in. This had, as one should expect, set off the entire class into firing off a million questions. At least until they felt an almost bloodlust-like aura coming off of Uraraka, causing them to back away from her, thinking she was still upset about not getting to punish Bakugo herself. Deciding to retreat, Mina ran up to her room, with Toru following closely behind her. Tokoyami had decided to grab Izuku's hand and bring him with her to the girl's side by sneaking him through the staircase on the boys' side while all of them were watching the backs of Mina and Toru. Where did Midoriya and Tokoyami go? Ida asked Momo, but said it loud enough for everyone to hear him. I'm not sure, but Tokoyami probably went out since she did not run after Toru or Mina to the girls' side of the dorm. Well, either way we have a bigger issue to discuss as a class concerning Bakugo, and that is what Aizawa said about his previous behavior. Momo said, trying her best to change the subject for Midoriya's own good, hoping the excitement would die down quickly. Though she was not lying, as she indeed felt like they needed to discuss this topic beforehand so they can ask the teachers properly if they try to hold back on information. At a certain ONI settlement, third-person POV with a grunt and 9-foot-tall woman with similar or rather nearly identical looks to Mina crushed the skull of a bear with her metal club. Letting out a huff, she tossed the creature over her shoulders, letting the cubs go so they could grow up to become future prey. When she got back to the village, she was greeted warmly by everyone, as she was one of the best hunters among them. Women also typically held more sway here than men, as polygamy and open relationships were common among their kind. After all, why stick to one mate when they did not care about marriage that much? Though the rule of thumb was if you had a child with someone, you need their permission before doing it with someone else until your child turns 15. Since her daughter was the result of her catching a male foolish enough to wander into their village, that rule did not apply to her as he was not from their village. As such, she did not hesitate to break her trophy. The village itself was deep in the woods, with the villagers making use of an apartment building in the city for when any of them needed to interact with the humans. Everyone in the village chipped in to pay for it so they all could use it, as even the majority who did not want to live in human territory had to make deals with humans every now and again. Though not bad at it, she preferred to not use transformation magic to hide her size of a proud 9 feet tall all the time, as it was not worth the strain of doing so to her. But rather she preferred the more natural way of living, in the woods surrounded by nature, wearing simple furs and loincloths or on occasion kimonos. She also preferred being able to hunt fresh meat daily as well as being able to get drunk without concern. Fortunately, their village was hidden by an old tool used to make any humans who came close to avoid the area without them realizing it. Though, as previously mentioned with the father of her daughter, some humans are born with an immunity to such things, and as such they had people who trespassed unknowingly. Getting into her house, she tossed the bear carcass onto her floor before going to get her tools, almost calling out to her daughter. Remembering she left for UA, she let out a sigh. First her interest with humans caused her to want to go to school in the city, now she wants to become a hero. Good grief, she said aloud as she shook her head. Her daughter was born rather small by the standards of her own kind, so she had accepted it when Mina said she could blend in with the humans. Going as far as to learn transformation magic at a fast pace when she suddenly got her growth spurt and grew a whole foot taller overnight. Something the mother hoped would allow her daughter to finally see she did not belong among the humans except to eventually capture a male from among them. Given her heritage, however, she did not blame her, as she was always considered partly an outsider by the others due to her father. It also played a small part, more than likely, in why she was so short, as usually the human genes lost out to theirs. But on extremely rare occasions they did accidentally win the genetic struggle. The reason she knew it was not of the men from the village she had slept with prior was because the chief used a spell to check which males in the village shared DNA with her. Only to see it was none of their men, and the answer became clear due to the timing of the human she captured. Later, when she was eating dinner, she was told a letter arrived for her, and it was from her daughter. Happy she got a letter from her daughter, she then opened it, only to scream and toss her table out of the side of her house, making a hole in it. What happened? The one who gave her the letter asked, worried as she looked ready to murder a whole army. I'm going to the human realm to visit UA. I will be gone for a bit, she exclaimed in annoyance as she got ready to leave for the city right away. Chapter 8, Third-person POV. Having prepared himself for their arrival as soon as he ended his phone call with them, Nizu was finishing the last of his tea when he heard a knock on his door. The parents of Katsuki Bakugo are here, sir, Midnight said as she knocked on the quirked animal office door while trying to keep the enraged mother from kicking down the door. Let them in, Nizu told her as he put his tea set aside so she would not break it if her son's behavior was any indication of their behavior. What the hell do you mean you're removing Katsuki from the hero course? Mitsuki Bakugo screamed as she stomped her way to Nizu's desk, slamming both of her hands on it. I think it is clear enough, I do not know how you expect me to simplify it any further, Nizu said, holding back his urge to chuckle at the foolishness of the human before him. Honey, please calm down. I'm sorry for her rudeness, Principal Nizu, but I don't understand why you are removing our son from the hero course after the camp incident has already happened almost a month ago. Masaru Bakugo asked him in a stern yet still slightly nervous voice as he needed to stay level-headed for his wife and son's sake. Yes, indeed, I did not expel your son immediately, but that was because the media would have lynched UA if I had done so. But after his previous incidents and the fact his refusal to listen to the teachers and other pro-heroes is what got him kidnapped, all I needed was one more mistake to get your son out of the hero course. Luckily, his incident of destroying a training ground in the middle of the night was enough for me to do so, Nizu said as he pulled up the security file and showed it to them by turning around his monitor. The shocked looks of the parents were like a sweet treat for Nizu, who, like his cousin Cthulhu, humans, or rather most humans, meant very little to him. This can't be, Mitsuki Bakugo stammered as her face paled at this sight, but Nizu was not letting her off easy. So, he then showed her a copy of Aizawa official statement the HPSC forced them to keep quiet, as well as the recording of his first training incident. Now then, I believe I have more than done my duty to provide evidence to support expelling your son. Luckily for you too, I am willing to give him a second chance and not destroy his future by transferring him to general education, Nizu told them, making it clear that their son got off lucky compared to any other human principal residing over the school previously or at other hero schools. Realistically, if this was any other principal at a hero school, Bakugo would have been expelled long ago, even before the training camp, due to being such a liability. But unlike the human principals, Nizu knew he could easily protect UA from any backlash for the things Bakugo had done up till now. So, unlike them, he was as patient as a saint and was willing to give the young man a chance up until the training camp, where he pushed the proverbial envelope. In fact, the other principals would have outright expelled him for what he had done, rather than the gracious transfer to general education, still giving him a chance at a good civilian life. But that was neither here nor there at the moment, as Bakugo was now clearly too unstable to take any chances on HPSC and their annoying buttes be med. But it was much better for the principal having to deal with the HPSC than the fallout of Bakugo accidentally killing another student in hero training. Again, the HPSC were more annoying, but it was still the more morally acceptable route than risking the other student's life. "Thank you, sir, may we go see our son at the general education dorms before we leave?" Masaru Bakugo asked quietly as he helped his shell-shocked wife get up. "Of course you can, Midnight, if you would be so kind," Nizu said as the succubus let out a sigh with a smile and a shake of her head as she wanted the Bakugo issue done with this but knew better when it came to humans. With the parents gone and dealt with, Nizu would now begin an investigation into the previous school to dissect their lies they clearly filled both Midoriya and Bakugo files with. UA Auditorium. Nizu POV. After both first-year classes of hero students, minus Bakugo of course, were gathered in the first rows, I began to address a few topics. Making sure to ignore the incident with over 95% of the general education students getting detention for their actions. Though I could not blame them entirely for wanting to celebrate when they heard Bakugo was removed from the hero course, it was still extremely inappropriate. I know there is some confusion as to what happened yesterday. So, I will address that first before anything else. I said in my usual cheery voice when talking to people not in private. The 1B students seem to have heard from a few of the general ed students they were on decent terms with about Katsuki Bakugo's sudden transfer. Due to previous incidents, his behavioral issues, and the recent outburst of his 2 nights ago, Katsuki Bakugo will be removed from the hero course. I continued receiving a few shocked looks from 1B. Whether it was Bakugo getting removed from the hero course or him causing another incident I cannot be sure yet. This also has a connection to the next topic, the animosity between 1A and 1B to be more specific. I told them all, finally getting to the real meat of this meeting. All eyes went to Monoma, most of them seeming to expect me to give a final warning for him and a lighter warning to everyone else. Starting 2 days from now, we will begin the first ever student exchange between the 2 hero courses. I declared as I clapped my hands together, enjoying how everyone was panicking as it was not even brought up to the teachers yet. For the students, this brought a clear concern to all their faces, probably worried I am going to shake up both classes by doing a sudden swap between multiple students. On the teachers' side, however, all except Kayama and Aizawa were panicking as they did not even see such a plan coming their way. Kayama was already told by me as this was just an excuse to have Izuku spend time with his wives in 1B without drawing too much attention. Aizawa for his part knows that I have a bad habit of not hesitating to make use of someone no matter their age once they catch my eye, so he is probably not made any more suspicious by this. I know you're all confused, so allow me to go into detail. I told them after blasting an air horn through a megaphone once I had put on my noise-blocking headphones. Looking around to see everyone was silent, I then continued with the explanation of my sudden plan I came up with to cover for Midoriya. Fortunately for me, I was known to mess with even my own allies on a regular basis, so no one questioned whether I really had been planning this for a long time or not. Rotating between 3 days and 4 days, 2 students will swap places in the other class and the dorms. If it proves successful, then from the next year onward I will allow the class to vote who they send. But for the remainder of this year, I will choose the students myself. So, who will I choose? I said the last part with an extended hum as I pretended to think on the spot. The cowering sight of my students always brings a smile to my face, but I should not bully them too much. Nido Monoma will go to 1A as he is the main instigator in most confrontations. So, I hope this will allow him to make up with and get along better with 1A, becoming a good example for his other classmates in 1B. Izuku will be the one to go to 1B as he is a natural at becoming friends with those around him without even putting a conscious effort. I said, finishing my very long speech, now taking my time to rest my voice by looking around. Looking around, I saw the thoughtful looks of the teachers as they considered the viewpoint I had put forward regarding the students. A legitimate issue I had wanted to solve. It is just that I can solve multiple problems right now by taking advantage of Midoriya's situation that needed my help. Whether or not he knew or found out, well, ignorant humans tend to be happier than those who knew what was really going on. I also saw the upset looks of most of Class 1A along with the still concerned looks of Class 1B, albeit concerned for different reasons. The slightly contemptuous look from Kurashima in 1A that was directed towards Midoriya brought me great concern about a second Bakugo incident occurring, even though it was already calculated the previous night. Granted, I still had high hopes I would be wrong about it, but alas, my quirk made it so I was very rarely wrong about something. Unless of course I were to allow any emotional attachments of mine to cloud my judgment. Something I have had trouble doing for the past 200 years since All for One violated the rule of directly having a major impact on all of humanity. Especially since the time spent in that human lab a long time ago, but even so I must try to remain as objective as I can when teaching these younger humans to be as good as they can be. I understand all your concerns of launching such a new program, especially after recent events. But I ask that both classes make the other student feel welcome when they come to your classes and dorms. Well, what are you all waiting for? You're dismissed. The staff needs to have its own important meeting now. I declared, feeling the questioning and answer-hungry gazes of my teaching staff poking into me. But I was already accustomed to it, like they were to me blindsiding them with such announcements, so it was no real bother. Present Mike, however, looked to have gone into a moment of deep thought at the mention of Bakugo earlier. This made me worried whether he will push the Bakugo issue any further despite it being better for UA to move from it. Alright everyone, let's take this to one of the soundproof meeting rooms before we start the meeting. I said as I jumped from the podium to Aizawa's shoulder to speed up the walk. UA General Education Dorm, after Nizu meets Bakugo parents, third-person POV being led by Midnight to the general student dorms. She was annoyed at this human not willing to accept her son screwed up despite the evidence. Her continued murmurings of trying to think up of an excuse to talk with her son about giving to Nizu and her husband not helping her much to see reality. Someone had to push Katsuki to do it. His previous teachers always praised him for his behavior outside of home. Mitsuki Bakugo murmured in a state of self-delusion, thinking her son could control himself outside of home like she did. Her usual confidence was gone, scaring her husband but not raising any concern for Midnight. I'm sure there is a reason for what we saw, but we need to stay calm for Katsuki. Masaru Bakugo told her as he rubbed her back while they walked to the general student dorm. With most of the student body comprising them, they naturally had the largest building, with it being essentially a medium to large-sized condominium due to all the rooms required. With the size of the kitchens and dorm living room also being much larger than any of the others because of the number of people living there. Once they got to the front door, they saw what looked like to be almost all the students in the dorm having a sort of watch party. Watching an online recording of the sports festival based on the fact they could see a chat room on the screen with the date of the sports festival. Are they having a party to welcome Katsuki? But then why are they watching a recording where they have the chat room logs taking up part of the screen when they can watch a recording without it? And where is Katsuki? Both parents of Katsuki Bakugo thought before the truth dawned on them. Someone praised the BSTRD again. My turn. One of the students said, taking a shot from the alcohol made via one of the students' quirks. Due to Bakugo locking himself in his room immediately and present Mike leaving, they decided to make use of one of the students' quirks to make a drinking game based around everyone who mindlessly praised Bakugo online during the sports festival. Luckily for them, Midnight was the one to catch them and turn the lights off, clearing her throat, catching their attention. I understand why you all hate Katsuki Bakugo, but I cannot ignore the alcohol. So, I will only give you all a 30-day long detention term once classes start again and have you all write a 5-page apology letter by hand to the school. Only if you start disposing of the alcohol and apologize to the Bakugo family this instant. Midnight said, causing them all to immediately do as she told them to. This however did not stop the mother from becoming enraged. You little shits. How dare you have a party celebrating my son being punished? I should slap you all upside your dash, Mitsuki said, stomping up to them before being grabbed by Midnight, glaring at the mother hard enough for even the students to feel terrified despite not being the target. Go upstairs to your son's room and remember this. Never, and I mean never, threaten, let alone attack the other students ever again. What they did was wrong, but that is no excuse to attack the children. Understood? Midnight said, making it clear that all students, not just the hero students, were under the watchful care of the teachers. I am sorry for my wife. Masaru Bakugo told Midnight as he quickly guided his now pale again wife upstairs, with one of the students telling them which room their son was in. How dare they get away with dash, Mitsuki was about to complain again about the students when her husband stopped her. They are being punished. Masaru yelled at his wife, shocking her into silence as he never yelled before today. Taking a deep breath, he then rubbed his temples as he took in his wife's scared look. I'm sorry for yelling, but his speech at the start of the sports festival was very insulting to the other students. Like she said, I understand why they all do not like him, but the punishment she gave seems to be a fair one. Especially if the behavior Principal Nizu showed us in those videos was any indication to how he really behaved all these years at school. He told her, not liking to do so but still acknowledging that they screwed up as parents to allow his previous school to deceive them. But what if he loses his chance to become a hero because of this? Mitsuki asked her husband, with such great worry that it sounded more like a statement than a question. If he does, then as his parents all we can do is help support him down a new path and get his future back on track. Masaru told her as he hugged her, with them just being down the hall from their son's new room. Walking up to the room after a few minutes, they knocked on the door. Katsuki, it's us. Mitsuki said as they both heard the audible suction of air. Mom. Bakugo asked from his bed and through the door, as it indeed sounded like his mother's voice. But the quiet and weak-sounding undertone of it was nothing like the rowdy and confident women he took direct inspiration from in terms of his behavior. We're coming in, Katsuki, we need to talk. Masaru said, knowing the following conversation was not going to be a pleasant one by any standard. As they entered they saw, though dried now, streaks of tears going down his cheeks as he sat up on his bed facing them with his legs stretched out. So, I take it that the overgrown rodent showed you what I did? He asked them, expecting to get yelled at by his mother. But instead, to his surprise, she did not yell at him. Instead she sat down beside him and cupped his cheeks as his father closed the door and turned on the lights of the pitch-black room. Why, Katsuki, why did you destroy that training ground and ignore All Might when he told you not to unleash your attack on Izuku, but most of all, why were you crying? Mitsuki asked him, the usual fire of her attitude set aside, or at least what remained of it, so her motherly affection and gentleness could get through to her son. I did it. Katsuki Bakugo, said a nearly inaudible whisper, something even his parents had not heard since his quirk came in. What? Masaru asked his son, not understanding what he meant. I ended his career, All Might's career. After years of being acknowledged as better than Deku, he was the one All Might acknowledged, not me. When I challenged him to a fight that night he refused, looking down on me, again. Katsuki said, unable to look his parents in the eye, choosing to look down instead. Katsuki, I don't know what is going through your head, but Izuku never looked down on you, not for a dash, Masaru said, not being cut off like his wife had been all day. You're wrong. He was the only one who ever thought I needed help. Compared to me, being a hero was second nature to that dumbass. I am the one with a powerful quirk growing up, so why him and not me? Bakugo screamed as he began crying again, with his mother holding him against her. The clear sign of old burn scars on Izuku she saw in that first training exercise video made her feel uneasy, but now she needed to ask an important question. Once he stopped crying, and his father who joined the hug let go so Katsuki could sit straight, she asked him what was on her mind. Katsuki. What have you done to Izuku over the years? Mitsuki managed to bring herself to ask her son. Seeing horror and regret start to slowly appear on his face, she knew the answer would be what she feared. Chapter 9 UA Meeting Room Third Person POV. Due to this not being a major issue, Lunch Rush stayed out of the meeting as usual when minor things like this occurred. So instead, he went to double-check and make the new additions to the food order list for each dorm he now had to do on a weekly basis. Since he was the chef for the school, Nizu always let him place the order without needing to confirm with him. But with the dorms he now had to add their food stock onto his usual order for the cafeteria. With the fact that Midoriya, who was now revealed to spend 3 or 4 days a week in each dorm, meant that he needed to adjust both dorm amounts to account for him, as he ate quite a bit compared to most of the other students. With the remainder of the teachers gathered, Nizu began the meeting, taking note of how perfectly divided the meeting room naturally was. On his right side, going from directly beside him to the other end of the table, was All Might, Eraserhead, Midnight, 13, Cementos, and finally Hound Dog. For the left side it was Recovery Girl, Vlad King, Snipe, Ectoplasm, Power Loader, and last but not least Present Mike. Despite being on different sides though, both Hound Dog and Recovery Girl were more of a neutral stance on this, as they thought it was a good idea but were unsure of it. Eraserhead always made sure to sit not directly beside Nizu but at least a seat or two away unless he really needed to. This was due to Vlad King always trying to sit across from him, and Recovery deserved one of the top 2 closest spots more than any of them. While they were all grabbing their seats, he could see that other than Recovery Girl and Hound Dog, everyone else had already chosen a side of agree or disagree. Now then, does anyone have anything they want to say to start off the discussion? Nizu asked everyone, expecting the first comment to be an angry outburst, and he was correct as always. I am against forcibly swapping the 2 students on a regular basis. Why should I end up picking up Aizawa slack as a teacher? Vlad King yelled as he slammed his closed fist on the table, making the whole thing snake as he glared his rival straight in the eyes. That is not why he is doing this student swap. If you had a better handle on your students, we would not need to do this. And besides that, I would never need your help to teach my students even in an alternate reality. Eraserhead said in his usual dull tone, not liking that his self-proclaimed rival was wasting time by immediately getting off topic. On a side note, in an alternate reality where he essentially donated Midoriya to Vlad King, that counterpart sneezed while adjusting something around his neck before getting whipped by Midnight. I dare you to say that again, you goddamn hobo. Vlad King said, not willing to overlook the insult of his teaching methods till now. Whoa there, partner, I don't think this is a good way of hurting the kids either. But you did end up passing on your bad habit of picking a fight with Aizawa onto your students. Snipe said, placing a hand on the shoulder of the BLD hero, trying to calm him down. Making it clear that despite Aizawa's lack of tactfulness, the underground hero had a fair point. Snipe is right, as harsh as Shota methods can be at times, he never tries to get the kids rattled up with each other to the point of starting fights with other classes. Though I do not agree with you on the idea that this will be some kind of mistake. Midnight said, pursing her lips as she leaned forward with a hint of annoyance in her eyes. He did not call it a mistake, he just thinks there is a better way, Namiri. You and Shota are just being a little reckless, trying to randomly put one of the 1A kids into the 1B class hoping it will smooth things out. Especially with that person still possibly among them. Present Mike said, for once being on the opposite side of this debate from his friends. He also made sure not to use the word traitor, since he knew none of them liked it when he tried to say it last time they had a meeting. Enough of that nonsense, we are Cementos said, trying to tell him to drop the subject before such a rumor could spread. It is not nonsense. We covered all our bases by confiscating all communication devices and not telling them the location before going. There was also no sign of anyone following them to be close enough for any known telepathy quirk to reach the bus. We need to keep the traitor in one class to limit as much information he gives to the League of Villains. Present Mike shouted, cutting off his literally flat-faced coworker, not wanting to risk the potential traitor getting detailed information on both classes. Are you really insisting that one of those 2 boys is the traitor you insisted is among the students? Eraserhead asked his old friend, not liking how he was calling one of his best students a traitor but understanding his concern of a traitor's existence itself. If that is the case, then choose your next words carefully. Vlad King said, warning the loud blonde, as he also thought it was possible, but since they had no evidence chose to have faith in his colleagues and students. I agree, I hope you have evidence for making such a significant life-ruining claim. All Might said, not liking a smear of doubt to be painted across any of the students' good names, let alone Midoriya's good name. Sensing that All Might was one word away from punching Present Mike into a full body cast, 13 spoke up to calm down the usually gentle and over-forgiving man. The anger he was showing now towards present Mike was surprising, but it was just much if not more so surprising when he openly said he was not upset at Bakugo for trying to pick fights with Midoriya. That is until he apparently found out about the bullying, but that was another issue for another day. Easy now, you know that none of us would ever think that of Midoriya. 13 said, as not just she but the entire staff had it already cemented in their minds that Midoriya had a secret familial connection to him. Of course none had the courage to ask him about it, not even Eraserhead who disliked the man dared to approach him about it, for now at least. Yeah, she's right, so at least try to keep the bad jokes of yours to a minimum. Ectoplasm said, not even thinking to ever rile up All Might even if he likes his fair amount of trash talk. Not even I can easily fix this section of the building if All Might decided to let loose a serious punch. Power Loader told the loudmouthed blonde, reminding him to not cause a disaster with his conspiracy theories. Before anyone else could escalate anything further, Nizu spoke up, getting the last two here who have been quite thus far to speak up. Recovery Girl, Hound Dog, before this devolves any further from the original issue, what are your opinions? Nizu said, hoping for the two voices of reasons to quell everyone's worries. Well, in my opinion, this will if nothing else, allow Class 1B to learn to show a bit more restraint when sparring once they see how Midoriya holds himself back for his classmates' safety. Recovery Girl said, as she recalled the true power of One for All. Even with the little power he can access, Midoriya could still easily send most of his classmates to the hospital if he did not hold back. Then there was Vlad King's intense training and his overly competitive attitude that was infectious with his students, causing a fair amount of training injuries she had to heal from his class. As for the students' mentality, I believe it would benefit both classes to do this swap. However, we need to take precautions to make sure Midoriya will be fine. Unlike Monoma who seems to thrive in conflict, it would be like throwing Midoriya into a social lion's den. Hound Dog said, remembering how nervous he was when interacting with most of his classmates even after all this time. This got the dog-like guidance counselor to start to consider asking Nizu if he could look into Midoriya as well as Bakugo past school history. I have already thought of that. I have already informed Ibara Shiozaki, Kanoko Komori, and finally Reiko Yanagi to help watch over Midoriya in Class 1B. Given that Kendo will be busy reigning in her other classmates, the few who are left to choose left from meant these three would be the easiest for him to get along with at first. Well, at least I hope he expands his interactions beyond those three eventually. Nizu said, telling only a partial truth as per usual, knowing they would not approve of him subtly arranging for the All Might. However, despite his usual impression of being a brainless oaf, took notice of how Nizu was essentially pushing Midoriya to get closer to the girls first. I wonder if Nizu is trying to use Midoriya love life as entertainment. I better warn him and check in with Yaoyorozu about him and Uraraka as well. All Might thought as he wanted Midoriya to properly enjoy his youth while keeping up his training. UA Class 1A Dorms, Class Meeting, Third-Person POV. Everyone was gathered to discuss what to do about this new system principle Nizu had introduced as well as what to do about Midoriya. Or rather, to be more precise, it was everyone except Midoriya, Tokoyami, Hagakure, and Ishido, as all of them seemed to disappear somewhere. The look of frustration and anger on Uraraka's face made sense to everyone, as it was no secret to them she had feelings for Midoriya. Though none dare speak of it lest they force themselves into an awkward situation among their classmates. As well as the unspoken rule of, don't taunt the Uraraka, that they all learned to abide by for their personal safety after seeing the midterm exams. So, Momo began the meeting after calming down the fidgeting Uraraka, who looked torn between following Midoriya and staying here to discuss how to help him. Though it would have been better if everyone was here. At least those three are helping Midoriya to take his mind off this mess before he leaves for Class 1B the day after tomorrow. Momo said, feeling bad for Mina. Just as she was starting to make advances on Midoriya, the principal just had to send him to 1B for half of the week from now on. So, Momo and even Ida would let the pink-colored classmate have her time with him, though she would give the others a short scolding for taking up Mina time with Midoriya. It was bad enough that we just had one of our classmates removed out of nowhere, even though it probably should have happened sooner. But now we are forced to invite that guy to our class. Ojiro said, though not liking Bakugo would take him over the troublemaker from Class 1B, well for now. The implication that Bakugo might have done something, especially to Midoriya if their interactions were anything to go off of, bothered the martial artist. Standing up was Ida, who decided to voice his thoughts on the topic next like Ojiro did before they really started discussing the issue before them. For once I also think our teachers and the principal are making a mistake. How are we supposed to trust him not to abuse this chance to cause problems he couldn't before? Ida said in his usual manner of assuming the worst of someone who does not behave like he thinks they are supposed to do. Aren't you two jumping the gun on this? I mean, he looked like he was taking it seriously when the principal told us. Shoji said as he had grown an eye discreetly at the time to see their reaction. The worry on the usually cocky blonde face after Nizu pointed out what he was doing wrong was clear. He's right, not even Monoma would take a chance after how Bakugo was punished. There is a limit to how much of an idiot someone can be, you know, and I am pretty sure I am the expert on idiocy at this school. Kaminari agreed with Shoji, thinking they should give the guy a fair chance since he just got a final warning from Nizu. You're half right, Kaminari, the second half of what you said, that is. Are you really going to easily trust him after what Bakugo did? Well, what we know he did anyways. Jiro said, muttering the last part as she also suspected like most of everyone else that they would hear more of Bakugo actions once classes start again. I also think he should have sent someone else, hell anyone else from 1B to represent them instead of Monoma. Maybe then I would feel motivated to make a welcome cake for them. Sato said, though not liking Monoma any more than the others, would have, as he said he would, share his sweets with them. Exactly. At least send us one of their girls if we are giving them one of the guys. Mineta yelled as he jumped up onto the table before getting tongue whipped by Azui. Try to be quiet while we talk seriously about this, Mineta. Azui said, finding it annoying that he was missing the whole point of the meeting to be his usual self. With this the meeting devolved further with arguing, making Momo sigh with annoyance as she now had to get them all to focus again. UA Class 1B dorms, class meeting. Kind of. Third-person POV. Also make sure not to make fun of Kaminari for his intelligence either. Let's see who and what next. Kendo said as she looked at what was next on the list they made when they started the meeting. Though they wanted to discuss how to welcome Midoriya while also keeping him from finding out their class secrets for joint training. They first had something else to discuss. That was what they were currently doing, going over with Monoma what to do and not to do to use this chance to make peace with 1A after curfew hours at the dorms. Since it was shorter, significantly so to the point of heaven and hell distance, to make a list of what to do they decided to start with the not to do. As the larger list of what not to do was clearly the most important. Which was where they were right now after 30 minutes only getting through 3 of the 18 remaining students he had to interact with at the 1A dorm. Originally the list was random points they each brought up and then they quickly organized it into another list to do one student after another. Kaminari, Siro, and Mineta were out of the way, so they only had 16 students left. With the next one to be Momo Yaoyorozu, one of if not the most important, though not for what her family could do to him. But because how burning the bridge completely with her will likely cause all the other bridges with the others to burn instantly despite any and all progress he made. It was also thanks to Kendo being warned by Momo via text message that Tokoyami, Hagakure, and Ishido were getting close to Midoriya as of late. So he needs to be extra careful around them like with his other friends such as Uraraka, Ida, or Todoroki. Though everyone in 1A was apparently fond of Midoriya to some extent, he only really interacted with such a small group of the total class up till now for reasons no one knew yet. So as bad as that was for the ginger-haired martial artist to hear, it at least meant that Monoma would not be walking on eggshells like they first thought. As they had all assumed due to his gentle demeanor and supposedly naturally calming presence. That he was their class unofficial mascot like Pony was for them, with Bakugo being the sole exception as he seemed to not like being around anyone in his class. If not for the visible change in Ida from how he behaved in the exams, she would have doubted it. But the uptight speedster was indeed more relaxed and friendly since becoming friends with Midoriya was indeed a significant change from the entrance exam. But Momo had assured her that even though he was still incredibly uptight, he was still far less aggressive and confrontational than at the start of the school year. While this was going on, the three monster fiancés of the green-haired young man were waiting for the moment to reveal to the others what Nizu messaged them. Though they knew it would be coming, as they, unlike the others, knew it was to allow them to take their turn with Midoriya while the other girls got a break. UA Workout Gym third-person POV. Though there was a general large gymnasium meant for basic exercise and quirk training, Nizu had a state-of-the-art gym made with all the equipment possible. Originally Izuku thought they should take part in the class meeting, but Mina had insisted they might be forced to tell the truth of their relationship in front of everyone. Momo may have been able to be trusted to keep it quiet during such a meeting, but she had doubts Ida could keep his mouth shut. The other two and even Izuku, despite wanting to defend Ida, had to agree with her about the speedster blowing their cover. As the girls got out of the changing room, Izuku could not help but look at them as they walked out. Mina was wearing a white sports bra with a black tank top over it, with black form-fitting sweatpants with pink stripes. Then for socks she chose to with ankle-length white socks to contrast well with her pink running shoes. Tokoyami had decided to go all black as per usual when not wearing the school uniform. Going with a thin long-sleeve shirt, baggy sweatpants, and ankle socks with running shoes as well. Though simple like Mina's look, it was a bit more reserved in terms of showing off her body. Finally, was Toru, who wore a light pink sweater that was on the lighter side so she would not sweat too badly. Her white sweatpants with pink stripes were only slightly baggier than Mina's. Even though she was embarrassed at the thought of Izuku possibly seeing her exposed leg, she didn't want to show off by emphasizing her figure like Mina did. Finishing it off with white socks reaching halfway up to her shin with white running shoes that had pink stripes going along the sides. "What are you doing standing there, slowpoke? Let's start off with a run," Mina said, snapping her fingers in front of his face, making him realize he was spacing out. Before getting on the treadmills though, Izuku spoke up, still with a bit of a stutter though. Hagakure," he called out as she grabbed the handle on the side before stepping on it. "You can just call me Toru, but what's the matter, Izuku?" she told him, feeling odd to have him call her by her last name now that they are engaged, even if she was basically coerced into it by those two. She did not know why Midnight Sensei told them they could not do anything to him, or why Principal Nizu seemed to have a particularly strong liking for him. But she knew that those two were hiding something about him from them. "Since we're the only ones here, I thought you could let down your invisibility. It would be a lot easier to train together if we could see you clearly," he told her, rubbing the back of his head, feeling awkward as he knew she did not like showing her face to humans. "Www what?" Hagakure stammered, remembering how he saw her naked already, now feeling embarrassed at just simply showing her face to him. Granted, she was fine with other fairies seeing her naked, as her kind preferred to roam around without clothes usually except for when it rained, so as to avoid getting sick. "I mean, he's not wrong," Mina said, agreeing with Izuku as she would know signs of excessive strain from training better than any of them since she was a Oni. "I agree, it would be safer in case you start to strain yourself and cannot say so," Tokoyami said, not wanting the stubborn fairy to hurt herself just because of a light refraction spell. "Fine," Hagakure said, revealing her face once again to Izuku as she released her spell. Her long hair that reached just below her shoulders was as always a vivid chartreuse with pink specks caught the light nicely, almost as if it was sparkling. Her bushy eyelashes brought out more of the innocence of her big round eyes that held dual-colored pupils, with the outer layer of her pupil being a soft teal while the inner pupil was a flashy attention-catching yellow. "Appealing," Izuku said in a questioning tone, as if he was unsure if what was before him was properly described with such a simple word. Not realizing he said it out loud till he heard the eep bb appealing. Hagakure yelled as she went red with embarrassment, covering her face with her hands. Chapter 10 UA Workout Gym third-person POV. Just a moment ago, Izuku was entranced by Hagakure's beauty and called her appealing, but now, he was blushing even more than she was. Stuttering as he waved his hands around as he tried to decide between saying, "I'm sorry for saying that out of nowhere," and, "You are a beauty, Toru. So, there is no cause for you to panic over a compliment." So instead of apologizing or giving a more confident and concise compliment, what he said instead was, "Sorry that your beauty causes panic." Izuku exclaimed with everything he had. Fortunately no one was currently in the gym except for the four of them. As for what followed, what? Hagakure could only numbly say as she was unable to figure out what he was saying. Then Mina burst out laughing as she rolled around on the ground, with Tokoyami shaking her head as she did not understand how that came out of him. That numbness from his odd apology compliment was turned into laughter as she now joined her Oni friend. However, she was still standing as she rested one hand on her knee as she tried to cover her mouth with the other hand. Finally stopping, both girls got up and steadied themselves as to help him calm down. "You really are unique in how you compliment girls, you know that." Hagakure told him with a genuine smile. "She's right Mito, but you really should decide which of the two you want to say before you speak." Mina continued, giving him advice so obvious that a certain blonde should have told him it a long time ago. Afterwards they continued their workout, with him helping Hagakure to stretch herself properly. Mina waited for him to help her as Tokoyami was getting in quirk training at the same time by having Dark Shadow help her stretch. Or rather you could say she was stretching by herself as to make a shadow minion with her magic that could be passed off as a sentient quirk. She had to model its own behavior after her own subconscious. The treadmills were the first, while Izuku and Mina had theirs on the fastest setting. The other two had it on easy mode as Shigaraki would phrase it. At first they tried to match those two but quickly gave up. That is, once they saw how Izuku and Mina literally did not break into a sweat by the time they were drenched and gasping for air. Exercise 2 was weight lifting to help both leg, arm, and back muscles all at once. For this one they were all about equal, with Mina only able to lift a little more than them in comparison. But when it came to Izuku, he was far ahead of all of them in terms of how much he was lifting. As much as I want to be upset at him for basically showing off how much more he could lift. Hagakure said as her eyes moved up and down with his legs as he lifted the almost comically sized weight. Between those thighs and that butt, a different kind of fiery emotion is overwhelming me, and it's not anger, I can assure you of that. Mina said out loud, not realizing that Izuku was focused on his workout to the point he tuned out everything around him. Finally, they moved on to what would likely end up as the final exercise today, sparring. Or to be more precise, it was the three of them taking turns trying to knock him off his feet and pin him down without quirks. No, magic, now that he knew magic existed it was no magic for them and no quirk for him. The results were as expected, the three girls had next to no chance except for Mina who nearly tripped him twice within the 1 hour of attempts they all did. Once they were done, they sat on the bench for a bit to relax and drink some much-needed water. It was during this that Mina began teasing her fairy friend, sister, wife. It was hard to put a conventional label on a relationship as complicated as theirs was. If you ask me, you looked like a certain someone was enjoying being pinned down by him. Mina suggested as she wiggled her eyebrows at Hagakure who spat out her water. I am not AMSCST. Hagakure exclaimed with a deep red blush covering her whole face. Are you sure about that? Was the response Dark Shadow, or rather as the girls and Izuku knew better, was the response from Tokoyami. Yes. Hagakure complained in a high-pitched childish tone, not liking she was the one on the receiving end of the teasing. While Hagakure was messing around with Mina, and Izuku was being caught up by Tokoyami as to what happened. A certain metallic-skinned student and another student with a long tail walked in on them. Both needed to get away from their classmates after their intense meetings. Though both boys were surprised, their reactions were simultaneous but also a bit different as one of them recognized Hagakure immediately. That's what you look like, Hagakure. Ojiro exclaimed, not questioning that this was indeed his classmate whose face he never saw before. This was easy to tell due to how she was behaving with Mina. Are you that invisible girl? Tetsu both exclaimed and questioned as he was unsure of but was pretty sure it was her. He had heard of how she was clinging to Midoriya these past few days along with Mina and Tokoyami, which was why he was pretty sure it was her. Okay, Before you go dash, Izuku was about to say, tell the others, but the two ran off before he could finish. Well then. We are. Dark Shadow exclaimed, allowing everyone there to know the simplistic thoughts of the highly poetic Tengu in their ranks. As for the girl in question, Hagakure was, as soon as they left, passed out from the shock of two humans seeing her true form. UA Class 1A Dorm's third-person POV, I am telling you all the truth. Hagakure really did, there she is. Ojiro pointed at the doorway as they all walked in, with Hagakure now visible for them all to see. The classmates who were telling him he must have been imagining it were now shocked as much as he was. She really is visible. Momo exclaimed in a surprised yet only slightly raised tone, one of the few calm responses among her classmates. Well, DMN, her looks really do match her bubbly personality. Jiro whistled as she took in the sight of a flustered and now extremely shy Hagakure. I knew she was a total hottie underneath all that invisibility. Mineta yelled, not getting cut off till the end due to Azui being in too much shock to react right away. Be more polite, Mineta, but yes, she is definitely as cute as we all imagined, Karo. Suyu said, as she was in the living room at the moment to get away from her gravity-manipulating friend for a bit. Needless to say, the girl has gone down a dark rabbit hole as the meeting ended, and it was probably best to give some space, after she removed all sharp objects from her room, that is. Yeah, about that, she learned how to turn it on and off today when my quirk accidentally came in contact with hers. Izuku told them all, as that was the line Nizu told him to say to everyone. Given how unusual the one for all quirk was, the few who did know about it but not about the real identity of the girls, would not be surprised to find out it accidentally caused a quirk to evolve. Especially a highly unusual and non-standard one like Hagakure supposedly was based on how the non-human posing as a human quirk doctor wrote it down as originally. It also was an explanation that would explain the sudden invisibility if you take into account stressful or life-threatening situations. Like the summer camp, for instance, were known to cause a quirk to surge in its natural development. Be it a full-on evolution or just another aspect that was not known before. As any proper expert like Recovery Girl would know, since a quirk affects a person's mental state would also influence a quirk. Which is why she and many other good quirk experts out there hate that they still use things like minor tier or high tier when informing children of their quirks. Using such terms with a child would limit the growth of a quirk, especially since quirks function more like muscles in the sense that the more you train them the stronger they get. So, when Izuku gave this same explanation about how quirks actually function. I see, no wonder you were able to learn to control your quirk so quickly despite being such a late bloomer. In that regard I have been failing quite badly, as I had my quirk since I was 4 but have limited myself to thinking it could not grow since I got it. Momo told him, being like most of the population that thought of quirks as some sort of special power that was decided at BRTH or when it awakened at around 4. So then, she can choose whether or not she wants to hide herself. Jiro said, taking it all in rather well compared to some of their other classmates. As for Aizawa, who was told by Nizu to hurry to the 1A dorms after he was done talking to Izuku over the phone. Only to walk in just after his students returned from the gym and begin a sort of explanation sermon on quirks. He too was getting this explained to him in a way that he would have needed Recovery Girl or Nizu to explain for him to understand. For as well experienced as he is with training students and priding himself on being logical, he too, despite knowing quirks were more like muscles, still needed a reminder every now and again to remember that quirks can sometimes just be chaotic bullshit. So as much of a headache this new development was for him, as well as the greater suspicion this raised for Midoriya and the girls. He still had other things he had to do for his job, and Hagakure development would need to be studied more closely tomorrow. So, his investigations were delayed even more now, but not stopped. He would never let All Might off that easily. Okay everyone, before we get even more caught up in this, I need to tell you of the plans for the next several days. Aizawa said, shocking them all, as he had hid his presence perfectly from his students. Aizawa-sensei. Everyone yelled as he sighed at this show of surprise. We will be intense training from tomorrow Sunday, till Saturday next week. As that Sunday is the day of the license exam and to pass, you all will need to have fully developed at least one super move to pull out when you're in a pinch. Aizawa told them, seeing them all nod in excitement at what he just told them. So, get some good rest tonight, we will all be in Gym Gamma by 7 in the morning. If you are late, then you will have your lunch time cut in half. You were all officially warned. He said to them before turning his back to them and leaving, now more than ever wanting to do thorough research into Midoriya, All Might, and now those 3 students also. UA Class 1A dorms, Mina room, third-person POV. Despite the awkwardness earlier, they still insisted on Izuku sleeping with them tonight. Whether it was that they still did not fully trust, or perhaps that they will miss Izuku during his short time away. Ironically enough, not even the young ladies who this question was about knew their own feelings well enough to give a definitive answer. Okay Mito, you need to wear a BLNDFLD again for Toru, but this time you and me will take the bed. Mina told Izuku as she held the BLNDFLD out to Izuku so they could get to bed. Just the 2 of you? Tokoyami asked her, a bit confused as to why the Oni girl was wanting to share a bed with just Midoriya. I am doing this to make sure he doesn't try to do anything to you two on the ground. That is all there is to this, so don't get a big head about this, got it Mito? Mina quickly said, stuttering in embarrassment at having Tokoyami pointed out after she just said. Gee, got it. Izuku stuttered as his face became a bright red at the idea of sharing the bed with just her. Wanting to get this topic passed over quickly, she put the BLNDFLD on Izuku, shoving him into the bed despite his nervous half-struggle. Ignoring the silently snickering look that Hagakure was giving her, making Mina stick her tongue out at the fairy that was finding this nothing but amusing. I can't sleep while holding him. Both Izuku and Mina thought in embarrassment as they struggled to eventual sleep. Or rather would have if not for Hagakure using her fairy magic to make them quickly relax. UA Class 1A dorm's third-person POV. Momo had made sure to wake up early at 5 in the morning to make breakfast for everyone, which she quickly realized was unable to happen without help. She was racking her brain to figure out who could help when she remembered who she cooked with last time to make breakfast, kind of. Midoriya. I can get him to help me, she exclaimed in delight as she remembered how he easily did it last time. Yeah, she was still in the mindset of where she is used to ordering people around rather than being true equals with them like here at UA since day one. Fortunately for her, she always remembered to ask others for their help rather than order them around whenever she spoke to them. Otherwise, they would have hated her rather than adored her as the class mom. When she reached his room, however. Odd, he isn't here. Momo asked herself as she had to pick his lock when he didn't respond to her knocking. This confused her as she could not understand where else he was or could be at this moment, but it was clear that he wasn't forced out or kidnapped. I guess maybe I can ask Mina and the other girls for help. She decided, going to Mina room first as Hagakure and Tokoyami were likely there as well. But when the black-haired ponytailed heiress got to said room. WWW, what is this? Momo yelled as she saw them, now startled awake in their former sleeping positions. Hagakure was completely NDE as usual, with Tokoyami joining her as she convinced the dark and dramatic girl to try it just once. Claiming that since Izuku and Mina were both soundly asleep thanks to her, the bird-headed girl could allow herself to enjoy it under safe but technically risky circumstances. Eventually relenting, she did so, with both girls cuddling each other when Momo came in to see them. Lucky for her, Ochiko and Azui were on a different floor with both out like a light. One because of sleeping pills forced into their mouth. The other was too tired from her friend's earlier nonsense to wake up to anything except the alarm beside the bed after she successfully forced the pills down her throat. Jiro however heard it loud and clear. Within short order, as in just before Izuku began taking off the BLNDFLD, Jiro had made it there. Momo, what happened? She asked, her shout lowering down in volume considerably as soon as she saw Mina's bedroom. Looking between the pair on the floor and the pair on the bed, she froze for a few seconds herself before speaking. Jiro exclaimed in a tone that was 1/3 confused, 1/3 enraged, and finally 1/3 jealous that Mina got a boyfriend before she could. After a few minutes of the two girls getting dressed, all three of them and Izuku were kneeling before Jiro and Momo in the downstairs living room. "So, what exactly were you four doing in there? 'Cause if I had to take an educated guess, two of you did binge play last night while the other two watched and are apparently XHBTNSTS. Momo told them in a stern motherly voice, forgetting the fact she was the one that picked their lock when she got no response. WWE were not doing any of that. Mina almost yelled in embarrassment, remembering that everyone else was still asleep. You really expect us to believe that? At least lock your door if you want to keep corrupting Midoriya a secret. Jiro said, treating him like an innocent child like everyone. This was after one time Mineta mentioned a hand job in class before getting slapped by Azui as per usual. However, Izuku, to everyone's shock, actually had to ask what a hand job meant, apparently thinking it just meant massaging someone's hand. Apparently back in his old middle, and much to everyone's shock. He was bullied to the point where for health classes that were supposed to explain such basic slang or phrases in middle school, the other students forced him to leave the classroom and laughed at him, saying he would never need to use that knowledge anyways. To everyone, this just seemed that due to how volatile his quirk was, his middle school did not care enough to try to help him and treated him as a hindrance because of it. But we did lock the door. I double-checked. Hagakure nearly yelled back at her before her face froze for a moment. This confused everyone for a few minutes till she spoke her next Ming sentence. Come to think of it, how did she get in when it was locked? She said, putting a finger to her lip, tapping it as she tried to figure that out. Yes, the Ming sentenced Med, not her but rather Momo, who now realized she was in the wrong. As Momo refused to look everyone in the eye, they had their answer, and it was not a good one. Now 5 minutes later, Momo was sitting on her knees at the kitchen entrance wearing a BLLGG. Mainly due to Mina wanting to get some justice for the accusation of binge play from earlier, holding up a sign that said, "I am a perverted criminal who breaks into other rooms, I am sorry," in big bold letters. With both BLLGG and sign made by Momo herself using her quirk, how the heiress knew how to make one was a question they all wanted to ask but decided not to.